Brazil 2014 World Cup breakfast.
Good morning, it is 8 minutes past 8. Monday morning. How much impact are these jihadi videos having on young Muslims in Britain? Usman Nawaz is from Rochdale. He's a former member of the Young Muslims Advisory Group. Good morning.
Good morning, Nicky.
His younger brother Ahmed is also with us. Hello Ahmed, how are you doing this morning?
Morning, very well, thanks.
In Cardiff we've got Sheikh, Zane, Abdo, who's Imam of the South Wales Islamic Centre. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Morning.
Usman and Ahmed, have you heard about these jihadi videos? Have any of your friends seen them?
Yeah, Nicky, I've seen excerpts of the videos that have been posted online, and what you see in the most recent one coming out of Iraq with the 4 or 5 young guys almost sat around a campfire presenting an almost romantic picture of jihad, you know, where you can have a laugh and a joke, but the serious undertone is that you have to go out and kill with some of these what look like baby-faced young people from Cardiff. It's a really, really worrying thing, and one of the most worrying things for me is 2 things, really, actually. One of the young people said, what is preventing you from coming out? So really an appeal to the hearts. And secondly, that the appeal is actually coming from young people themselves, and you know, we all know the impact of peer pressure on a range of different areas, and you know, this is something where young people themselves, it's different from, you know, previous jihadi videos where we've had leaders of organisations.
But this is it's a warped picture of Islam. We're talking about crucifixions, and, you know, amputations and beheadings. How is that? You know, how do they make that leap?
Well, I mean, there is an element of brainwashing, but it's also a theological argument as well. A lot of this debate and conversation has been framed around the Sunni versus Shia. I come from a Sunni background. I am a Sunni, and I completely reject the understanding that ISIS have of Islam.
Sectarianism.
Absolutely, it's extremism. It's not, you know, a representative of Sunni Islam at all. And you know, over the weekend, both my brother and I attended a conference in Milton Keynes looking at the Amman message, which the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan published a couple of years ago, and that was about improving relations between different sects. And you know, the very clear message coming out of there was that the Muslims, Shias as Sunnis, both equally reject ISIS and everything that they stand for.
Okay, well, back with you in a minute. Let's get the former director of global counter-terrorism for MI6, and we'll speak to the Sheikh in a minute as well. Former director of counter-terrorism says the security services will never be able to monitor all of the Britons who returned to the UK after fighting in Syria. That comes after this video footage which came out. These 2 brothers, 20-year-old Nasser Mathana, 17-year-old Asil Mathana, and Riyad Khan has also been named. I mean, Usman and Ahmed, you know, normal lads doing normal things, then all of a sudden, I mean, you've used the word brainwashing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My brother, who's an A-level student, maybe can talk about some of the conversations that, you know, taking place on the street level. But I mean,
let's hear it. You've teed him up. You've introduced him. Ahmed, good morning to you.
Good morning, Nicky.
So what about those conversations?
These conversations are taking place, and you can just feel the sense of anger and frustration with these young people. With people that I've spoken to on the street, not everyone holds the same view.
Anger and frustration with what?
Anger and frustration with the mess that the Americans or the British left, and this is just following on from that in Iraq and Syria. But we have to see that not all young people defend the actions of these 3 boys who have gone from Cardiff, because some just want to go to Syria and Iraq for the humanitarian side of things, and to go and help their Muslim brothers and sisters, as they put it.
Why the anger with Syria, since you know, surely the anger should be with Assad? And also there are lots of people, this is the whole thing about this sense of identification. Perhaps you can just explain to us. There are lots of people, I know plenty of people, who think that on both sides of the argument, I know some who think that British foreign policy is appalling, but they don't want to become terrorists. They don't want to betray their country.
Yeah, the frustration, where I've spoken to young people in college or outside college, I've said, why is America or Britain not intervening now? they intervened so many years ago. Why are they not intervening
So
now?
damned if they do, damned if they do, damned if they don't.
Yeah, exactly. And they're putting themselves. They're saying that we have to go and help them themselves if other governments aren't going to help them. But Nicky, there's also the theological background to this as well, which is the reason why these killings in Iraq are taking place in such a big scale against the Shias is because they can justify these Salafist and Wahhabist undertones can justify it with saying, well, these guys are not actually Muslims, so
what's it called? Takfir, when you say somebody else is not. That's a word which says you judge who and who isn't a Muslim.
Absolutely.
This Salafist and Wahhabi thing. This is Saudi Arabia. I mean, what's the significance of Saudi Arabia in all this, guys?
Well, the birth of Wahhabi Islam came from Saudi Arabia about 200 years ago. And when the Ottomans were wiped out, a lot of that was to do with the theological justification provided by a guy called Muhammad bin Abdul Wahhab, who basically said that these guys are not Muslims because they for a range of practices that they carry out, and therefore killing them, fellow Muslims, is actually a legitimate thing to do. This ideology has continued, and this is how we see the spread of sectarian violence, because it's actually it's calling another Muslim a kafir or a non-Muslim, and therefore saying that his blood is lawful to shed, and that is what we see happening in Iraq at the moment.
Well, that's really interesting and somewhat chilling. We'll hear from the Sheikh in a minute. Mark Hutchins in Cardiff. You found out more about these young men over the weekend, Mark, haven't you?
Yes, and there is a sense of shock, I think, at seeing such startling images of these men from Cardiff. Two on the video, the third, a 17-year-old also believed to be out in Syria. I think for some months, people in certain quarters in Cardiff have known that these men went, but nevertheless, it's startling to see such chilling images in this message sent back home. I spoke briefly to the mother of one of the men, Riyad Khan. She said she was extremely stressed and unwell with all the worry, and has appealed for him to come home. I also spoke to a 17-year-old Muslim student who played football with Riyad Khan. He told me what he knew of him.
I always found that he was very pleasant. He was very ambitious. He never used to speak openly that much about himself. He was very quiet. But
did he talk religion at all?
Yeah, he was very pious. He was a bit extreme. So he would approach us and say, listen, to be a good Muslim, you got to do this and do that.
Now, South Wales police say they are increasingly concerned about the number of young men going to Syria from Cardiff, but stress that this isn't unique to Cardiff or Wales.
Well, Sheikh Abdo, hello.
Hi.
You knew both the men who'd gone out, the two brothers. What were they like?
Well, they were very normal young men. The youngest one who's gone, I knew him a bit more. The oldest one never came to our mosque, although he lives several doors away, which is also a problem in itself. He chose to pray in other mosques, those mosques that have a Salafi orientation.
That's the Saudi Arabian thing again, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as my colleague said, very well. I think it's at the crux of this whole thing that you'll find that people who go and do these type of things, or ISIS and so forth, no matter what the names are, Boko Haram, Shabab, they all have one thing in common. They all have this Salafist ideology. Saudi Arabia may not condone their political ambitions, but they do share the same theological platform as Saudi Arabia.
So what do we do about that?
There's many issues here.
Yeah, there are. We haven't got time for all of them, unfortunately.
Can I just say something? Yeah, what I will say is that, first of all, we knew about this in November. The oldest one, Nasser, went in November. The youngest one went 2 months later, or 3 months later perhaps. I've done several sermons, one very discreetly after Nasser went, saying that this is wrong. People should not be disciplined.
What did they go to do, though? Did they go to fight, or did they go initially and ostensibly for humanitarian?
No. That's established that they went to fight. Everybody knows that. And what's amazing is that this has been known for months and months in Cardiff. And if realistically saying, if it wasn't for the video on Friday, the media would have been, in the same position they were before Friday, not knowing anything at all. So I mean, I've done several sermons on this. I've spoken about this. I've sat with people individually. We've talked about this. Just yesterday, we had the video. I dissected the video with several of my Islamic law students that I have. We dissected it. We listened to it. Why is it wrong? We had a debate. I had a same discussion with several members of my community, parents and their sons. We watched the video. Why is it wrong? You know, is it right? Is it wrong? Why is it wrong? Is it right? Why is it right? And then I've come in, I've counter argument the whole thing.
Well,
so,
at least
at
least it's in the air, and it's being proproperly debated, properly discussed. That's a problem, by the way.
Yeah. That's a problem. Sorry to cut you off, but it's a problem because you've given them a platform. The media have given them a platform. What they want is to be heard. And the media, on Friday, 216 people watched that video. Saturday, 15,000 when I checked. Within 1 hour, it jumped by 1,000. Granted, not all of them are young people who are maybe radicalized, but how many young people now have watched that video, listened to what they've had to say here and different places, and maybe start thinking about doing the same thing.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Sheikh. Before that, thank you to Usman and Ahmed as well. It's 80 minutes past 8.
This is 5 Live.